On to our third speaker, Stephen Clucas, who is a reader in early modern intellectual history at Birkbeck, University of London. He has published several articles on Cavendish's natural philosophy and edited one of the first collections of essays dedicated to her work, which was A Princely Brave Woman, Essays on Margaret Cavendish, which was in 2003. And many of us, of course, are familiar with his work on Cavendish and with that specific edition, of course, too. And he's currently editing with Timothy Raylor, Thomas Hobbes's De Corpore and related manuscripts for the Clarendon edition of the works of Thomas Hobbes. So I will turn the floor over to him, our final speaker.
Thank you so much, Anne. Let me just share my screen. And while I do that, apologize if some of what I'm about to say sounds familiar to you. I'm suffering from the problem of being the last speaker, in that some of the things I was going to mention have already been mentioned. But it means we're all thinking in the same direction, so I think this is a good thing. In a preface to her observations on experimental philosophy, Cavendish both acknowledges and dismisses the idea that her prodigious output of writings might be a symptom of a mental illness. And this is the quotation we've already heard from Leanne. It is probable, she wrote, some will say that my much writing is a disease. I do very believe they will not take it to be a disease of the brain. Perhaps they will say it is an extravagant, or at least a fantastical disease, but I hope they will rather call it a disease of wit. But let them give it what name they please, yet of this I am sure, that if much writing be a disease, then the best philosophers, as also the best divines, lawyers, physicians, poets, historians, orators, mathematicians, chemists, and many more have been grievously sick. What some might see as an unseemly logorrhea is rather an abundance of ingenious wit, a condition she shared with her scholarly contemporaries. One might add that even today, writing is an activity which is still viewed with incomprehension in some corners, sadly, sometimes in governments. Cavendish stoutly defended her right to employ what she variously calls natural fancies, natural reason, and regular reason, although she was aware that her thoughts could appear erratic to some. In a series of poems prefacing her philosophical fancies of 1653, Cavendish wrote an epistle to her museful thoughts, in which she exhorts the thoughts to dance with the muses in measured feet, which are both wild, like toyish girls, and sober, grave. In a poetic dialogue between reason and her thoughts, reason urges the thoughts not to run in such strange, fantastic ways, suggesting that they choose instead a beaten path, lest they be considered mad. Her thoughts, however, reply with a demand for libertas philosophandi. Reason, forbear, our study not molest, for we do go those ways that best please us best. Nature doth give us liberty to run, without a check, more swift far than the sun. In a poem entitled Another to My Thoughts, she sees strange opinions passage as the only way for her imprisoned thoughts to escape, although then when they find a way, they run so fast, no reason can persuade to stay their haste. In the world's olio, Cavendish insisted that wit is wild, fantastical, and therefore must have no set rules, for rules curb and shackle it, and in that bondage it dies. It requires instead a perpetual motion with continual changes and varieties. Cavendish's thought then seems to exist in an uneasy relationship with the restraints of reason, teetering on the brink of wildness, and even madness. There are certainly philosophical grounds in Cavendish's thought for this uneasy relationship. In her epistemology, which took its mature form in her philosophical letters of 1664 and in the grounds, there is no inherently stable causal connection between the mind and the external world, as perception and cognition are dependent not on mechanical causes, but on the voluntary imitative behavior or patterning of self-moving matter. So, for example, our image in a mirror is not caused by reflected light rays, but by the self-moving matter of the mirror choosing to imitate our figure. Our shadow on a wall is not caused by our body's obstruction of light rays, but by the self-moving matter of the wall choosing to imitate the outline of our body. Cavendish repeatedly tells us that this rational matter, both in the mind and in the material world, is in perpetual motion and is disposed towards variation. Nature, she says, takes delight in variety. So how is it that we are able to attain a reasonably stable account of the world? Why is it that nature does not choose to constantly mutate from moment to moment, although of course in a certain sense it does? Why does our cat not transform itself into a camel or a sewing machine as it crosses the room? It is because nature is wise, prudent, regular, and avoids extremes or extravagancies. Nature's motions, she said, are not extravagant, but orderly, temperate, free, and easy. Although nature's motions are sometimes extravagant, yet in her fundamental actions there is no extravagancy. Nature is infinite and has infinite free will, but for the most part chooses those motions which conduce to the stable continuance of the universe. Nature hath but one law, which is a wise law, viz., to keep infinite matter in order. There is no confusion in nature, everything is orderly and methodical. Nature's actions are infinite, she says in Observations upon the Experimental Philosophy, but they are poised and balanced so that they cannot run into extremes. If this is the case, how is it that irregularities or disorder occurs in the universe? And here I feel some overlap with what Jonathan was saying a moment ago. Cavendish's holistic view of infinite nature means that everything which occurs is natural, even though to an human individual or part of nature, it might appear to be unnatural or pathological. That which man names war, sickness, sleep, death, and the like, Cavendish says in philosophical letters, are but various particular actions of the only matter. So, pathological conditions like physical or mental illnesses are just particular temporary actions of an infinitely self-changing nature. We perceive them to be disorders, but this isn't actually the case. They are, in fact, part of nature's freely chosen design. So this is, Jonathan was talking about the idea of our parochial view of certain kinds of motions. There are contraries in nature's actions which are corporal motions, which cause mixtures, qualities, degrees, discords, as also harmonious conjunctions and concords and like effects. Health and diseases, she wrote, are nothing else but the regularity and irregularity of sensitive corporal motions. But where does irregularity arise? Why does nature sometimes exceed the boundaries of her wise and prudent governance? The answer would appear to be variety. Nature makes irregularities for variety's sake, but she is more careful of her regular actions, and thus nature, taking delight in variety, suffers irregularities, For otherwise, if there were only regularities, there could be not so much variety. Cavendish allows for the existence of irregularity because she is committed to a view of the universe that is both rationally ordered and creative or generative, productive. Without irregularity, there would be no variety in the universe, no copia. For Cavendish, nature is both a logos and a logos poetikos. Ultimately, of course, because of Cavendish's probabilism, which is ultimately grounded on the belief that it is impossible for an individual part of nature to know nature's infinite whole, any rational account of the world has to be partial, in at least two senses of that word. However ingenious or witty the interpreter is, no matter how much they exclude symbolizing expressions or poetical fancies from their philosophy, and however much they rely on the workings of regular reason and rational probability, there will always be an unknowable excess or remainder in the perpetual superabundance of nature's activities. Nature's actions are not only curious, but very various. Not only various, but very obscure, insomuch as the most ingenious artist cannot trace her ways. Thank you.